Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Well, it is an honor to be with you here today. I am very grateful. I'm grateful that you choose to show up to leverage what we have to share. We wish to inspire you, but more importantly, we wish to leave you with nuggets that you can apply right away to enhance your own leadership. And at the core of what we're about here at Lead Live, LEAD standing for Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand, is encouraging you to be the CEO of your own life. And many of you are doing that and doing that with distinction. Well, that's what this is all about, is edifying you with additional insights. And today I'm especially pleased to have the honor of inviting into the studio in just a few moments, Donna Rubin. Donna has a distinguished history, a legacy of being an institutional investor, former financial journalist for Bloomberg News. This woman has done quite a bit in her life, and she chose to really narrow her focus in a way that actually enhances our understanding in a broad way of women, of young females, of individuals who've written and written with distinction about important matters that affect us across the planet. Who is this woman? Well, I want to give you just a brief bio. She founded and is the CEO of Speaking While Female. And that's the topic today, Speaking While Female. But she's going to focus in on the secret history of women's speech. And why is it secret? I'll be asking her. And she'll be illuminating. And I think some of you who are observing this, especially if you're female, you already have some of the answers as to why it's been secret. And many of you, our male partners out there, our brothers, our husbands, our best friends, our fathers or grandfathers, cousins, you know too. You understand why it's been secret. We want to illuminate and remove the secrecy because the power in women and what we've had to say historically that's recorded and many of which is not recorded is it's so important to our lived experiences and to our ability to create what we can't currently imagine as one individual that exceeds our expectations, that add value to life itself, humanity overall, life itself. So she's been focused on elevating women's public voice, expertise, and experience in the public sphere. So, again, as a former financial journalist for Bloomberg News, an institutional investor covering the reinsurance and insurance market, this woman chose to build a bank, a speech bank of over 1,800 speeches by females. Yes, you heard that right, over 1,800 speeches. She celebrates the very best of the wisdom of females through the ages. And so, without further ado, I'm going to ask this remarkable woman who does a lot. She continues to speak, she leads workshops, she consults with organizations that want to support and promote diverse leadership. So, Donna, would you please come in? Bring her. Wonderful, Donna. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Elnora. I'm really, really pleased to be with you and your audience today. I'm honored.
We're honored to have you, and the audience is going to understand even more so by the end of this broadcast. Can you share something with us that folks would not otherwise see in social media, and they perhaps would not know about you, but it really illuminates the essence of who you are?
Well, I am passionate about the um, the relationship between the speaker and the audience. I was a journalist. You talked about my journalism background, and then following that, I was a speechwriter for a long time. I still do some speech writing, but it was when I was a speechwriter that I became more narrowly focused on women's voices. But in the broader sense, I'm very interested in, compelled to learn about and study the what takes place between the speaker and an audience. A good speaker, a powerful speaker, can change a person's life, change an audience's life, because there is an indelible bond between one human being and another when they are speaking with authority and speaking with authenticity. It's almost like there's a direct line into the receptive audience's being. So I've been struck by this relationship, profound relationship between the audience and the speaker for a long time. And it's only been in the last few years that I really focused on women speakers and what happens when women speak to other women in particular.
Well, you've mentioned two words that I think are quite powerful, uh, authority and authenticity. Authority and authenticity. Can you define those a little bit for the audience? I know most people are going to know what they mean, but I want you to define it in a way that really resonates with you.
Well, I don't have a dictionary explanation, a definition, but when I think of authority, I think of expertise. I think of speaking about something that you know. You might know it because of your personal experience. It might be your lived experience. You went through this experience, you saw it, you understand it. It might be something that you've studied. You might have a degree, or you might be self-taught and you might have learned something yourself, but you have learned information. It might be something that you experienced because of your professional experiences, your professional circumstances. But through the years, as I have coached women and worked with women, I have observed that it can be very challenging, for women to assume the mantle of expertise. To say, I
Even
am,
though they have expertise.
oh, in abundance. In
Mhm.
abundance. Not everybody is an expert about everything. We have expertise in different areas, but a woman could have a PhD and have written 3 books and scores of articles for the Harvard Business Review, and you ask her what her expertise is, and she'll say, not every woman. I have
Mhm.
to be clear, but
Mhm.
many women, more women than men for sure, will say, "Me? I'm not an expert."
Mhm.
Or they'll
Mhm.
say,
Mhm.
"It was really a team effort. It wasn't really just me, who's responsible for
Mhm.
this achievement or accomplishment." Or sometimes they'll say, "I don't like to brag." And the problem with that is that we live in a world in which men are socialized and accustomed to bragging all the time. They're just more comfortable with it in general.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
want to underscore, I'm speaking in aggregate. I'm not talking about
Yes,
every man or
individuals.
every woman,
Mhm.
but in aggregate, men are more comfortable with that behavior. And it is harder for women to put themselves forward in the world as authorities, as experts.
Mhm.
So when you ask what do I mean by authority, I mean someone who has knowledge and insight and can tell the world what's going to happen in the future.
Mhm.
Clients want to know, the world wants to know,
Mhm.
are interest rates going to go up or down? What is the price of oil, a barrel of crude going to do? What are the impacts of climate change? What's happening in the diversity and inclusion world? Experts know these things. And all too often, we don't account for our own expertise and we think we don't have knowledge and insight to share.
Mhm.
That's, you asked about
Mhm.
authority.
Authenticity. Mhm.
I think of authenticity as being genuine, being your whole person, being honest and candid, of course, but
Mhm.
being true to yourself. And that's also not an easy thing to do. We live in a world in which we're very focused on externalities, on self-presentation, on looking the right way, on appearing the right way, projecting the right image. And I don't think those things are wrong to focus on. I mean, it is performative when we stand in front of an audience or when we speak on
Mhm.
a podcast. There's a performative dimension to it.
Mhm.
But if we let the performative outweigh our genuine authenticity as people, then we're going to have a not very effective communication. So speak with authority and speak with authenticity.
Why is speaking while female a so-called secret history?
Well, the speaking while female, I'm sure you realize this, but it's a bit cheeky. It's a
Yes,
little sarcastic. It comes from the expression
yes,
that was popular, in the last couple of years, driving while black, right?
yes.
The idea being that a black person would be driving down the street doing nothing but driving, and they would get stopped and pulled over and questioned, right? So I chose the name Speaking While Female as a cheeky response to that. But to be clear, I didn't come up with the name. Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant used it in a piece they did in the New York Times that got a lot of play. And I thought it was very effective. They weren't doing anything with it. About a year later, I checked, they weren't commercializing it. So I took it and I got the trademark for it and then ran
Smart.
with it. And also I wrote to Sheryl Sandberg, never heard from her, but I wrote to Adam Grant and let them know, hey, thank you for this name. And Adam wrote me right back and said, great, I love what you're doing with it. So I don't
Excellent.
feel bad about that. But I
Yeah.
didn't come up with the term. But it refers to all of the complicated challenges and opportunities that we have speaking as women, as females, and hey, as anybody who wants to call themselves female. I don't have any hard and fast definitions. If you want to call yourself a female, non-gender, non-binary, the world has changed a lot, even since I started this endeavor. So I want to be
Mhm,
clear about that. I'm not excluding anybody. I am
mhm.
opening up avenues of communication and ways to appreciate content and ideas that haven't been fully appreciated and haven't gotten the recognition that they deserve.
Well, I appreciate just showing a visual of one of your creations where you've just taken just a spotlight of a few females. What was compelling for me months ago when I learned about what you're doing is just the depth of of your effort, and it's not just superficial. The names that we may come to know, there are people, there are women, there are young and older, and there are folks who've gone on. They're in the ancestral world, if you will, in the spirit world. You're looking at reaching back in time and moving forward in time in order to capture diverse voices independent of where they're on the planet. Of course, the vast majority are in the United States, but you're really trying to ensure that we know these folks spoke about particular areas that are of importance to us as a species on this planet, correct?
Right, right. I'm all about diversity, but you know what? Let's be real. Our notions of diversity keep changing all the
Mhm.
time. I mean, that's the world that we have been living in these United States in the last couple of years, and I'm all in the last few years. I'm all for it, but it can make it hard to keep up. So that what the image you were showing was from my homepage on my website. I think initially I had an image, and I try to make sure I only use images for which I have the legal right?
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
had black women and I had white women, and then someone said, "You don't have any indigenous women," so I added an indigenous woman and mixed them around, and then someone said, "You don't have an Hispanic woman," so I found this. But I'm trying to get images that are all taken by the same photographer, so I know that I
Mhm.
have the legal right to use them. And
Mhm.
then someone said, "You don't have a person by, someone who's differently abled." I thought,
Mhm.
I can't.
Mhm.
Oh, I forgot to say. Initially, I was really trying to get intellectual diversity. So I have
Mm.
conservative women, I have Republican women, I have women who are anti-abortion, I have women who are pro, reproductive right. I tried initially because I'm very focused on the exchange of ideas. I'm very
Mhm.
interested in the way that ideas move through our culture through the centuries. I'm fascinated by the way that the French Revolution opened up ideas of the role between the state and the individual and the rights of the individual. Then we had our French Revolution and we had the American Revolution, Age of Enlightenment, and Industrial Revolution. I look for ideas that, women's voices that represent all these different ideas. Then we get to, of course, suffrage movement, and civil rights and feminist debates, it can be very hard to find a sampling of voices that really reflect all the diversity, especially for my homepage, especially for
Mhm,
my homepage.
mhm,
So, but
mhm,
I, above all, wanted to make sure that people knew that while I mean, anybody who would know me would know I'm on the left side of the political spectrum. I make no bones about that. But I didn't want it just to be identified as a social justice warrior. I wanted, and I'm not putting that down. I mean, at all, not remotely. I just wanted everybody to feel welcome. People who had ideas from across the
mhm,
political and,
mhm,
and ideological spectrum to understand that this is about women's voices,
mhm,
women. And you asked why secret. And the
mhm,
reason it's secret is because we haven't known. Our culture, our history, our gatekeepers have not included women's voices in the history of oratory, in the history of rhetoric, in the history of speech making, in the history of ideas. I mean, until recently, if you opened any social studies textbook, you would find a story of deeds and actions mostly by men, of
mhm,
course, and that includes men's voices.
mhm,
Men's voices. So if you talk about um, the American Revolution, you talk about the Revolutionary War, you talk about the early days of our nation, and all those other great movements. There were women who were speaking on all those occasions. Women speaking even when it was not accepted socially for women to speak, even when women were so-called silenced and kept from the pulpit, kept from preaching, kept from speaking in public. There were women who spoke, who resisted and used their public voices. And that's the history that I want to tell.
mhm,
That's why
mhm,
I call it the secret history, uncovering the secret history of women's speech.
mhm. Wow. So you've basically answered the next question. What led you to illuminate female speeches?
Well,
This
I'll
is
tell you,
this is
yeah.
more than just an initial, interesting idea. Let me do this for a short term. Go for it.
No, well, I mean, what really happened was, I mean, the inciting incident, if you were writing a script, you
Yes.
call the inciting incident. The catalyst was one day I went to my bookshelf and I pulled down a volume, an anthology of speeches that is a classic. It's on bookshelves across the country, called Lend Me Your Ears by William Safire, the great William Safire. So I grew up reading his columns in the New York Times on language because I'm a language nerd.
Mhm.
And he was a speechwriter for Nixon, for Richard Nixon. And he wrote this column for the New York Times on language. And in the 90s, I think 94 or something like that, he published a collection of speeches called Lend Me Your Ears. Of course, that's a quote from Julius Caesar, from Shakespeare. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. And it was an anthology of greatest speeches. And I pulled it off the shelf and I started counting, just out of curiosity. Counted all the speeches. There were 220 speeches, and 15 were by women.
Mhm.
200, I think 220 by men and 15 by women. Right. So there were like 235 speeches, and I I almost threw the book across the room. I got so mad. So then I was on a tear. Of course, I was obsessed. Started buying all these speech anthologies in the English language. I restricted myself to the English language, but anthologies from United States, Canada, Ireland, the Philippines, South Africa, everywhere English language, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And I just started counting them up. And then I put them all in a infographic so you
Mm,
can see. And it just looks like a sea of blue. The blue is the men and the green is the women. And you can just see women's voices were not represented. And I thought,
mhm,
this can't be true. So I started researching,
mhm,
just looking for women's speeches. And that was really what led me to create the
mhm.
website. And one more thing, you said in your introduction, I have 1,800. I don't know where you found that, but I have more than 2,500 now.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So
Well,
you're
there's
just
more.
continuing to grow. Well, of course,
There's
there's
so many more.
how many women are on the planet, and how many women have given speeches? Countless. So, but the fact that you're mobilizing, you're building a bank of them is quite remarkable.
Oh, there were hundreds of thousands of women who spoke. And at some point I opened it up and realized it wasn't going to be just for American women, US and Canadian. So I added speeches from women around the world, and oh my goodness, there's hundreds of thousands. And I don't go to archives. I really don't go to university archives and look through the manuscript boxes. I mostly use books that I can get online or material that I dig up online. But I've just scratched the surface. And
Well, let's get in some of the meat of it.
yeah,
I'm thinking about your acknowledgement of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Eleanor Roosevelt, Barbara Jordan. Number of those names, if not all of them, many folks know. Not all, but many folks. And then you illuminate Greta Thunberg, less familiar voices. She's more familiar maybe than some of the others. Lydia Thorpe, Claire Lehman. Where and so these folks and others have written about, they've spoke about nuclear power, child labor, international relations, feminism, anti-feminism, sexual education, cyber harassment, social welfare, taxation, war, climate change. I can go on and on and on and on. And these women are in different industries. And some of them are not in a particular industry. They're among the leaders in the community that just rose up because there was a vacuum or because they knew there was a need. How is it that you're choosing these women from different ages, different classes, different geographical regions, political expressions? What leads you to placing particular ones in banks? And related to that, can you describe the kinds of speeches that are most compelling? And do you find a common theme across this diverse group of women?
those are a lot of questions.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to remember them.
No, I'm not. I'm just excited.
How do I choose speeches for the site? Well, there are rules, laws in this country and around the world about what you can
Yeah.
publish. So I try to be very careful about not publishing anything that is not in the public domain or for which I don't have permission. So if, according to the US Patent and Trade Office, USPTO, or intellectual property rights laws, any speech given before, I think we're up to 1925 now, in January, I think it'll be 1926, is generally in the public domain, with some exceptions. And so I publish those. If I find a speech before 1926 and no other prior rights owner has exerted their rights, expressed their rights, then I publish them. And if it's a more contemporary speech, a more recent speech, I will reach out to the rights holders when I have time and ask them, request permission. Sometimes they want me to pay a fee, a nominal fee. From other speeches that are more contemporary, I sometimes link to another website's content or YouTube, but I don't like to do that because I want my archive, I want my speech bank to last in perpetuity. Like
Got
long
it.
after I'm gone, I want it to be a resource for girls and women around the planet to look at and learn from and be inspired by. So I try to minimize the external links because those just get broken over time. That's just the nature of the internet. So that's how I choose them. And then what else did you ask me, Elnora?
Well, I ask you too many things. I really want to get a sense of whether there's some kind of common theme, and it sounds like there's not. But the common theme that you found in reading these speeches, this rich text.
There is really not a common theme. I mean, people ask me all the time, are women different from men? Do women express themselves differently from men? What are the differences? And I'm not a sociobiologist. I'm not I'm not capable of talking about, I'm not a neuroscientist about the human brain and differences between the female brain and the male brain. The only thing I can tell you is I personally don't believe there are significant differences except that throughout history, women primarily played the role of caregivers and homemakers. And even during, let's say, the 19th century, beginning the 18th, 19th, and certainly into 20th, 21st centuries, women have branched out into the professions. Women are still playing the predominant caregiver roles in our society, and that tends to make women often care about the underdog, concerned with suffering, caring about welfare. Not that men don't care about these issues, of course, and nowadays we see rapid social change in our country, and we see more and more men showing these qualities, and that's wonderful, and women showing other qualities traditionally associated with men. But if you look through the sweep of history, more women than men express concern for, like the peace movement. The numbers of women that were in the peace movement after the global peace movement after World War I, by the tens of thousands, not nearly as many men involved with that, because women were the one who nurtured their children and then sent their boys off to the battlefront, and they came home in boxes. So women generally have shown a more compassionate side and a greater concern for welfare of humanity, but that's the only thing I can say. Aside from that, women have been on opposite sides of just about every issue. For temperance, against temperance. Like I said, for reproductive rights, anti-abortion. For the women's vote, against the women's vote. There were a lot of women who didn't want women to have the vote. I put them all out there. I put them all on the site because I want us to see that our democracy our democratic countries that we live in are noisy, and they consist of arguments for and against on every issue. And that's the way that we process information, and that's the way we work out our differences and decide our future. It pains me. I mean, I want to make one point, which is that this is an archive about the past, right?
Yes.
But it is for the present and the future. The past is past. I want these speeches to inspire women and girls today to understand that this is our heritage and to use their voices today and in the future. And it pains me no end that in lots of places in the world, in China, in Korea, in places where the internet is censored, women don't have free access to this information. And they need it.
There's so much to what you just said. We're going to come back to it
I'm obsessed.
in a subsequent question. When you were asked who were America's greatest speakers, I read some place where you were asked that. What did you conclude?
Well, very often I start my talks when I ask my audience to take out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and just jot down off the top of your head 5 of the greatest speakers, American speakers or not, around the world. 5 great speakers not living. Whoever, and I'll invite your audience right now to do that. Who are 5 great speakers? And then after I've given them a few minutes to write that down, then I ask them to look at it and say, how many were women? Generally speaking, people will say Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, JFK, RFK, Ronald Reagan, men. If it's a woman, it's usually, maybe it's a Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. Of course, they're not dead, they're living, thank goodness. But
Mahatma Gandhi.
if it's a woman who's passed on, then it's an Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Susan B. Anthony, or maybe Eleanor Roosevelt, or maybe a Shirley Chisholm or Barbara Jordan. There's something, Helen Keller, Elizabeth I. There's a handful of women who we know in our common culture to have been speakers, but it's always the same women over and over and over. When I look through these anthologies and they include women, it's always the same women over and over. But what about the other hundreds of thousands who are never mentioned? So that's an exercise that I ask my audience to engage in, that really opens our eyes to the fact that we don't associate powerful speaking with women, with a woman's activity. It's a lot of other things we think of that women do well, but we don't associate a powerful voice with a woman. And that's a problem.
Yeah, as you talk, what comes to mind are a number of different stories, a number of different historical events, and one in particular. I remember a video, and primarily because it's on the internet now, and for whatever reason, it's come back up and it's passed around of Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to run for president. And most people don't know there was a woman in the late 1800s who ran for president, right? Most people think that it's recent history. But when Shirley Chisholm was basically outed by even journalists and others in the mainstream as, you're Black. What do you mean you want to run for president? And her response was, what did she say? I'm trying to remember. She said, as a matter of fact, she's prepared some of the, oh goodness, I wish I could remember the essence of what she said. Um, who was it that ran? Basically, she said that what's wrong with my running for president of this country? After all, for 15 years, I've been ghostwriter for a lot of them. And most folks don't know that a lot of women like you were behind the scenes writing for others who would present, and people would say, "Oh my God, that was a stellar speech. That was exceptional. That person is an extraordinary formula or creator of not only a speech but just contriving language and putting together words in a creative way that's compelling, that gets to the heart and soul of people, which is what you were talking about earlier, and helping them, prepare them to give that speech, not just writing it, but providing them with the guidance on how to come across as authentic, how to come across as an authority on that subject matter, when in fact, she might have been the authority on some of those and they weren't. And so I think about that, and I think about the so many other women who are, as you've rightly conveyed, who are leading organizations right now that we don't even know much about, and they're quietly taking care of business. They're the CEOs of some mid-sized organization. There or large organizations. There are many executive directors of community-based organizations. They are vice presidents of corporations, of universities, there's chancellors, they're presidents, they're making a difference. And as you also rightly conveyed in one of your writings, the number of valedictorians from high schools, what is it? What's the percentage? The vast majority are women?
I think something like 70, 75%.
Yes, yes, and I don't necessarily like this trend, but it's been happening for over 20 years. The number of individuals who are graduating from higher education are disproportionately women. So obviously, as you said earlier, we're earning those degrees. We got the right so-called letters behind our name that may or may not mean something to us. And then we're doing the work, we're living the experience, we're guiding people, and we're writing about important things. And yet somehow the silence is too pervasive.
Right. You put it very well. One of my biggest, greatest desires, I would say, is to see more women's voices in the public sphere, in the so-called marketplace of ideas. It does bother me greatly when I open the paper. I'm an old-fashioned. I still read the paper in paper. I read it online too in digital, but I open the paper figuratively or actually, and I see men's words, men's ideas, men on the op-ed pages, men in the reviews. Women read far more books than men, but men make up the majority of movie reviewers, literary reviewers. I mean, anywhere there is a gatekeeper to our culture, and analysts, there are far more, an analyst, someone who surveys the landscape and helps us make sense of the cacophony of ideas and occurrences. There are far more men than women. Now, it's starting to change. In the last few years, we've called attention to the Manel problem, the Manel situation, in which you'll have a panel of experts and they'll be overwhelming women.
Women.
It's become very, very hard now in our culture to hold an event and have a panel of experts and not have at least At least one woman. If you do that, you'll get called out, and that's all to the good. You should. But only a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, there were males in every industry, and we can still see that in the Fortune 500 companies. You can still look on the websites and see all men in the executive suite. There are many, many fields, healthcare, many fields, food services, where the fields are overwhelmingly made up of women workers, but at the top, men. So how do we change this? How do we get women into top leadership positions? We have in our culture a pipeline problem, a talent pipeline problem. Women start out equal numbers to men. In fact, as you were just pointing out, in many fields, greater than men. But women disproportionate, that's right. But then they drop out of the pipeline and they don't come back. So how do we keep women in the pipeline? And law is another one. Medicine, how do we keep them in the pipeline and rising to the top? Well, there are many initiatives, many endeavors. The whole DE&I field is full of them, and talent development field is full of them. But I would argue that I do argue that supporting your women to use their voices internally in your organization, to learn how to speak up and self-advocate, to play the lead role in a presentation to a client or internally, to speak at a town hall, to be on the intranet, to show your expertise and put it into the world. And then externally, every conference in your industry, every single conference should have a woman from your organization there, showing everybody else at that conference that your company supports female talent. Because they're going to come to you because of that. Diversity is so important now to companies. Every company has a line item for diversity initiatives, and they know that their stakeholders are demanding it. So if you want your brand to say to the world that you are a female-forward brand and that you support diverse talent, support your women to rise through the pipeline and stay in the pipeline and make it to top leadership, you should be supporting your female talent to speak strong.
You remind me of one of my advisors years ago, back in the 90s. She had a conversation with those of us who were in the room in the seminar, and she says, there's the metaphor of the pipeline. What's an alternative metaphor? And I'm not going to do her justice, Pat Cross, Dr. Cross. What's an alternative metaphor that would allow for more to enter and lead? And it was very curious. Smart, brilliant people, many much more than I. And we all sat there, looked at her with a blank stare, and we had challenged to get beyond the obvious. Well, pipeline, that's what everybody uses. But what's a metaphors so significantly influences our daily lives, and we're not even aware of them, right? Just like these symbolic images. And so she said, if we want more people to get through for whatever reason, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it is indigenous in particular, or blacks in particular, or women, whatever, of folks who would otherwise not historically be in a particular space, how do we redefine our metaphors in order to ensure that we're influencing even the person who doesn't want to be influenced to do what's in the better, to the advantage of that organization, be it a corporation, be it a profit, nonprofit, other entity, be it municipal, governmental organization. And so even to this day, I don't have a direct answer for her, but I tend to steer away from using the word pipeline.
I take
So
it.
when you said it, it reminded me. It was like, wow, that's powerful. Another woman thinking outside of it's traditional.
Sometimes we talk about a ladder. I mean, if you think of the path to the top, and we have a leadership gender imbalance in this country. If you look at the number of female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, I think we're at 24%.
On corporate boards, it's absolutely
it's not high. So let's call it a ladder. How do you get up the ladder? Sometimes you step down a rung, sometimes you go back up a rung, but how do you in general keep female talent moving up the ladder? That could be another way to think about it. But the problem, however you define it, the problem remains the same. Not enough women get to the top. or to the
Yeah.
end. They don't get to the end or they don't get to the top. So what are the impediments? Are they not recognized for their accomplishments? Do they not put themselves forward when opportunities come up? Are they known in their industry? Are they respected and widely listened to in their industry? Are they rainmakers? Are they business developers?
Mhm.
If they don't play golf, maybe they do. Do they make social connections that can turn into business deals? Because that's the way business is done. It's always been done that way, and I think for your and my lifetime, it will continue to be done that way. How can we get more women to become successful business developers, to grow their companies, bottom line, to be seen as a rainmaker, to be seen as a leader, to be seen as someone who understands what the future will bring and can share that with their clients and with their stakeholders? That's what thought leadership is about. That's what leadership is about.
And let me tell you, that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on board, because part of the answer, it's not the complete answer. Part of the answer is doing what you've chosen to do. No one told you this is what you must do. You chose to create this bank. You chose to convey the power of women's voices through the speeches that they've given. You've chose to provide a resource for folks who are moving into the future, wanting to understand those who preceded her are those individuals that could actually provide the underpinning, and that they understand that there's already a foundation to step on and to take off from. And so that's why you're here. You are inspiring generations in that regard. So I just want you to know that that's the primary reason why you're here. It's
Well, thank
great
you.
that you're a wonderful human being, as I've experienced, and not and up close and from a distance. And so the other thing, that reason why I wanted to have you on, and that's why I like to have a diversity of people on, and especially women, is because I want to encourage all of us. There's this meme out there. There's this messaging out there that somehow we don't support each other. Well, you and I both know, we know a lot of women who support us, and we support them. And even if we don't know a lot of women, the fact that you're doing what you're doing, I'm choosing to do what I'm doing, demonstrates the power of us helping each other. And it's not about folks liking. I may like you, I may not, but I can edify you even if I don't like some aspects of you.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I don't
And
think
that
I
Go
don't
ahead.
think we should I don't look to every acquaintance in the workplace as someone who I like or don't like. Some,
Mhm.
even in our closest relationships, we like some things about people, we don't like other things about people. But we want humanity to move forward. We want to learn from each other and respect each other, and take the best ideas and
Mhm.
help the greatest number of people. So it's not about agreeing with one another all the time. In fact, it explicitly is about not agreeing with one another.
Yes, because what you said, in the power of diverse voices, you get to actually expand your own understanding. I find it uncomfortable to listen to some things that are antithetical to my value system, but I don't close it. I give myself a little bit of time with it, not too much, because I don't want it to harm my spirit and alter my values. But I want to know what's out there in order to respect that other voice. I don't have to know all the details. I don't have to know all the ideology of that spirit. But what I do know is that at the beginning and the end of the day, we need each other.
We really do need each other. And there's another point I would like to make, Elnora,
Mhm.
about how you choose to stake your ground, like where you choose to put your energies. And I speak from my experience with regard to this issue of women's voices, because very often in our society, we end up in a lane. We study social work and we learn all about social work, and we see the world through a social worker's
And
perspective, or finance,
mhm,
or
mhm.
energy, or whatever it is. We see the world through that point of view. But I really admire and support an interdisciplinary mentality.
Mhm,
I'm a big
mhm,
supporter of the humanities.
mhm.
Unfortunately, support for the humanities is decreasing in our society
Yes.
because it's seen as not um, pragmatic, in terms of job creation, but it was only because I had a multidisciplinary perspective that I saw that there was a lack of resource and attention paid to women's
Mhm.
voices. Because I am a history nut, I have a history degree, I studied history in college, read about history, learn about history a lot, and I was a writer, cared about language, the English language and the written and the spoken word, and I was a speechwriter.
Mhm.
And I one day I went to the bookshelf, pulled down a book, and the stars, the scales fell from my eyes. But it was only because I had
Mhm.
a perspective from different areas that I could see nobody was doing this. There were a few people, I could tell you some names of a few people who'd kind of looked at this issue and really realized that women's voices weren't well represented, but no one had put them all together on the website. And anyway, the point that I'm making can be applied to any of you in any of your lives, no matter what worlds you've cultivated and what worlds are colliding in your own imagination. You may draw from the sciences, the natural sciences. You may draw from any world, the worlds of other countries. You may speak other languages and understand other cultures, but when you draw from a wider intellectual net, you can make associations, creative associations, and leaps that other people can't.
Yeah, it's powerful. My best work literally has come from being in partnership with diverse others in terms of the way they think, their own industry, expertise. All of a sudden, we put it out on the table. I don't necessarily understand the other. The other may not understand me. But we work to listen to understand first rather than to be understood first. And then all of a sudden, something seemingly organic and fluid happens. And the product that we create far exceeded what any one person could have created alone. It's the part of the genius. And that's why we know in historical books and we know just in terms of practice, people who leverage masterminding, they usually are wildly successful. When they have a set of core values that they all agree to, they have confidence in the other, they keep confidence, the other's confidence in appropriate check, and they leverage, 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 leverage. It's powerful, the whole notion of masterminding. And that's what I think we're talking about to some degree, Donna, right? Leveraging the other in a way that allows for the continued growth and creation that adds value.
Right, and you said something also that I think is very powerful, which is the need to listen, to enter into a relationship with another person or another
Mhm,
person's ideas in a listening mode
mhm,
and be receptive to
mhm,
their ideas, even if you decide that you don't agree with them, even if you
mhm.
decide you don't like that person, you will sharpen your own understanding of why. You will
Yes.
sharpen your own responses to it. If you stay in a mode of listening and empathy so that you
Mhm,
can imagine or try to understand where that person's coming from, that person may have a completely different set of cultural and social reference, a completely different educational background, life experiences. If you listen, listening is the first step
mhm,
to
mhm.
cultivating and sharpening your own place in the world.
Two things I want us to end on. One, you talked about the humanities, which I absolutely value deeply because it really predisposes all of us to use our critical faculties. And our critical faculties are not just our intellectual, mental tools, the memory, reasoning, perception, uh, uh, intuition. What am I missing? There's
Analysis, yeah.
the
Mhm.
will, there's 6 major
Mm.
mental faculties, and then what it does, our critical faculties allows us to honor that heart-mind connection, to be, as you said, empathetic, to listen with a sense of having an open mind, and part of the mind is an emotional mind. In fact, the emotional mind drives most of our behavior every single day, and most of us don't know that. We're like, that person's so emotional. Well, guess what? We all are. 95 to 99% of what we do every day is driven by the emotional mind unless and until we decide to reprogram that emotional mind using our mental faculties. But what does humanities do? It exposes, it opens us up in terms of our entire self. It's the critical faculties. It's feeling through the music and art and dance. It is the understanding of our place through history, through philosophy. It's stretching us, right? I mean, what is humanities? I had the honor to be a dean of a college of humanities, social sciences, arts, humanities, and social sciences. And I mean, it was the most awesome experience working with faculty who were so steep in just illuminating the greatness that abounds around us. And if we all are well educated in the humanities, all of a sudden the doom and gloom stuff based upon facts would no longer overtake us because we would be sufficiently balanced with understanding our capacity because we're so steeped in the humanities. So, Donna, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think my passion for the humanities is coming up without even talking too much. The other thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. I thought of something though, you made me think of something.
Go.
No, you gave me a really interesting idea, which is that my project is a collection of women speaking to us. If you can figuratively imagine, we're on the computer screen and because it's online content, and we're the recipients of knowledge coming to us, women's voices through the centuries speaking to us in different modes, through audio, through text, through video. But we are listening. We are in the listening mode. If we're not in the listening mode, in a mode of receptivity, we're not going to gain any of that knowledge. So the first step, and we go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, which is the power of communication from one person to another, one person speaking to another and communicating with another. If there's not a mode of interaction in which there's receptivity and listening, nothing good is going to happen. So what was your thought? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the other thing is we both are leveraging the financial services industry because we understand the power of it. And you mentioned something to me earlier, and we said, no, we're going to leave it for here. And I didn't know. And you said women have been writing about the insurance industry since as early as, and probably predates this, the 1800s.
Well,
Can
I
you speak to that?
was recently speaking to some women in the insurance sector,
Mhm.
and so I did some research. Whenever I give talks, I always do some research to find examples of women speaking in that sector, and I found two speeches by women in the insurance field who spoke in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair. And they said, I'm aggregating the two of their speeches together. What they said was, number one, women, all kinds of fields are opening up to women. You don't just have to be restricted to being a teacher or working in, domestic care. You can, all these different fields are opening up, and among them is insurance. You should consider being in the insurance business yourself. Number two is you should consider investing in the insurance. These insurance companies are big companies, and if you're going to put your money in banks or you're going to put your money in in corporations, consider investing in insurance. And the other was, if you own insurance, if you own shares in a company, if you are widowed and you inherit shares, you are a stakeholder and you have a voice in that company and how that company is run. So step up to the plate and use your voice. I was flabbergasted when I saw that in 1893, women were talking to other women about, the insurance sector and the many ways that insurance is powerful for women and opens up opportunities for women, not just to be insured and have security, financial and security, security through the vehicle of insurance, but as a professional opportunity and an opportunity for being agentive or influential in the running of a company.
And it's so powerful, that language, because it makes me think about Leland Stanford Sr. He was invested in the insurance industry. And as a result of his investment in the insurance industry, without going to all the details, when he died, his wife was able to leverage the funds that came from his investment to complete the building of Stanford University. Otherwise, might not have been concluded.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I did not know that about his connection to insurance. I know that they lost their son, right? They didn't have
That's
the,
correct.
but I do
Early.
have in the archive her speech. What was her first name? I can't remember at the moment. Jane Stanford? Jane.
Jane.
Yeah.
Is it
I have
Jane?
this, I
Mhm.
don't remember. I have the speech that she gave. I think it's in the education category. The speech that she gave to the board about education. So she also
Interesting.
used her voice.
Yeah, Jane.
Jane
Jane.
Leland
Yeah,
Stanford.
that
Yeah.
that was in my head. It's Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful. Well, I want to ask you one last question, and I'm not certain exactly how to frame it. Um, I'm thinking about women and and girls uh, and our remarkable understandings that do not have to come from a formal education. We have understandings that are just innate that then are that can be amplified because of our formal education. We also have to be careful not to nullify it through our formal education, right? Too. But I think about the innate power of girls and women. Can you speak to that from your all the speeches you've read? What does that power suggest to you in terms of our abilities in any way? What does it suggest to you? I don't want to complete it with something that guides you in a certain direction, but what does our power suggest to you?
I don't know exactly, but I will say that I'm very optimistic about the future.
Mm.
I happen to be a big advocate of speech and debate, and I judge debates, high school debates in the area that I live in. And I see young people who are, including women, who are learning to formulate their ideas, to rigorously evaluate information and marshal, you know, arguments and step up and under great pressure, time pressure, competitive pressure, are able to express themselves and engage in an intellectual debate. And I'm very inspired and hopeful because I see young women stepping up in ways that my generation did not and previous generations did not. So I
Mm.
think my response to your very general question, very open-ended question,
Mhm.
would be a message of hope.
Deep appreciation. Yeah, I share that hope. As I listen, as I observe, and definitely speak with young people in particular, I'm amazed. I think they're just, well, I fundamentally believe that we're all born great. It's just a matter of can we hold on to it, given all the socialization and et cetera. I got to tell you, the younger they are, the more I see greatness. And if we as we function as humans, as adults, as elders, we can just tap that greatness and remind them of it and encourage that greatness. I agree with you. Hope is not only smart, it's strategic and it's real.
Thank you. We're
Thank you.
we're we're hope sisters. We're
Yes,
sharing and nurturing hope with one another.
it's an honor. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for being here. Any last words you'd like to share
No, thank
as
you.
we
It's
close
been a
this
pleasure.
out? Thank you. It's an honor. Well, folks viewing, hopefully you have some wonderful takeaways. There's many more questions I could have asked this stellar woman, professional, an individual who cares about all of our voices and making certain that we get to experience historical voices that have given us the foundation on which we can build even more. So, Donna, thank you. All audience members now and those who will view this in the future, our gratitude for you leading with distinction in a way that works for you, allows you to live with integrity, continue to grow, add value. Because of your successes, our successes are amplified. Why don't?